everyone, this is Peak Entertainment and we are back again, and here now we have another video for you, and this will be a review of Injustice. This is the latest DC animated movie from their huge catalogue of feature-length adaptations. This film is of course an adaptation of the famous Injustice Gods Among Us story that was created by Nether Realm Studios computer game way back in 2013. The story itself was given far more expansion in the comic book series soon after released in the same year. Now the overall story about Injustice is that we are set in a reality involving all of the classic DC superheroes, where Superman is ultimately tricked by the Joker into killing his wife Lois Lane and their unborn child. This also culminates in a massive nuclear bomb being triggered in Metropolis, killing millions of people. Superman ultimately seeks and attains revenge by killing the Joker, and overall realises that a stricter, far more tougher approach is required in order to combat the world's crimes. Superman then proceeds to claim dominion over the world's governments in order to defeat all of the evils happening within the world. Now some heroes with the Justice League agree with Superman, but then others don't agree with this approach, and being led by Batman, they begin an opposition force against Superman's tougher regime. Now, over the course of the story, we see various DC superheroes go through their own ordeals and battles against each other whilst deciding whether they should support either Superman or Batman. Now, whilst having some potential, I think overall this is a very disappointing entry within the DC animated movies. The film itself has such a rushed, uneven pace about it, really blitzing through some of the most impactful moments within all of the Injustice storyline, and at the same time trying to cram in so many other elements, particularly of the comic book material, without giving them the proper focus that they needed. Overall, there's no real true moment or scene that truly sticks or leaves a lasting impression, because the script is so quick to jump towards the next plot point without fully developing the interesting ideas and concepts that it introduces, and it all ends so abruptly. It really makes you wonder how really invested the writers were in adapting this story into an animated format. Now overall, Injustice has always been a super expansive and at times convoluted narrative as we go into all of the various side stories of the DC heroes, but the main narrative of a main insurgents group fighting against Superman's regime has always remained a very compelling and interesting Elseworld story. Now, as we all know, to get a better sense of the Injustice story, you can go onto YouTube and watch all of the collective cutscenes from the first game that have been re-edited into one singular movie that runs for around 2 to 2.5 hours, and that presentation did such a far better job of creating far more tension and gripping scenes and compelling storylines. And if you are a massive fan of the comic book series, you'll probably be very disappointed by so many characters who have been left out or sidelined. I also have to say I've never been a fan of the animation style. This movie itself being produced by the Nether Realm Studios, it carries over the same animation style that we've seen from the recent Mortal Kombat animated movies. The aesthetic, where we get this very blocky style in terms of how the characters are drawn. So many of them are drawn with very sharp edges and indents on their faces. Certain characters have that more very jagged look about them. I look at particularly Wonder Woman, who they gave far more of a slender, muscular look about it, and it wasn't as attractive, as appealing overall to look at. I still overall prefer the new 52 animated continuity art style, and of course the classic Bruce Timm and Paul Dini aesthetic that we saw in the animated shows Justice League and Justice League Unlimited. Now when we go back to Injustice, the story in the beginning, after a very rushed opening pace, does seem to have some value when we see Superman beginning to outline his manifesto to the government, and in the early parts of the movie it does make you think that Superman probably does have a point when he states all of the issues in terms of the corrupt politicians and the tyrannic. It does make you feel maybe Superman is fighting for the right side, and that those are opposing him are maybe in the wrong. And over the course of this opening quarter, we do get those familiar common debates about whether superheroes should be governing the people. Do superheroes have too many powers or too much influence? Who is going to reign in the superheroes? How far or how much of extreme do we go to when it comes to policing the everyday society? But over the course of the film, we do venture into certain subplots and side stories. We get some truly ridiculous subplots involving Nightwing and Ra's al Ghul, and it's really keeping out of tone with the overall story, and it almost makes you feel like you're watching a completely different movie. In terms of the characters themselves, I think Superman was handled quite well for 2/3 of the way. We understand his motivations, but here he's much more of a reflective and conscious personality. Up until very much the halfway point, he does question whether he's going too far and whether what he's doing is truly for the greater good of the people. Wonder Woman was relatively marginalised in much more of a supporting role to Superman, and in many ways she was much more of the driving force in Superman exhibiting his rule over the various governments. Batman, to be honest, was the same typical personality that we've seen in so many recent iterations throughout the role, very cynical, always opposing Superman and what he believes in. We look at Damian Wayne, who had far more of a prominent role in this story, as did Nightwing for the first half, in probably what's the most impactful scene throughout the earlier movie. The other main characters involved are both Green Arrow and Harley Quinn, who provide the movie's only real comic relief, but again become far more insubstantial as the story progresses. Other main characters such as Green Lantern, Aquaman, Hawkman are all really have limited roles. This will disappoint a lot of the hardcore DC fans. Now, there are some violent scenes with various outpours of blood. This is in keeping with the usual R-rated adult tone that we get nowadays with the DC animated movies, but I don't think there's any examples of profanity throughout the film. And as we've seen with the most recent animated movies, the likes of Batman: The Long Halloween, Justice Society World War II, and Superman Man from Tomorrow, Injustice is very much of a standalone entry. There's no end credit scene or references that lead on to other individual DC movies overall. So if I had to give a score for Injustice, I would sadly give it a 4.8 out of 10. I just think it's a very disappointing entry. It doesn't fully utilise the expansive world and universe that we get within the Injustice storyline. As I mentioned before, you can really watch those cutscenes from both Injustice and Injustice 2 to get a greater idea of how much this should have been in terms of its overall length and scope. The amount of different characters and world building is such that I really believe that Injustice should have indeed been a 2-part adaptation. It's a story that far warrants that extra length, far more than what we saw with Batman: The Long Halloween. And overall, when we look at the elite group of DC animated movies, when we look at the likes of the Batman Under the Red Hood, the Flashpoint Paradox and The Dark Knight Returns, Injustice I feel will be a crushing disappointment for many fans who deem it an iconic storyline, and I would have very much liked to have seen it get the same high quality treatment and production as what we've got with those best animated shows or those best animated movies within the DC universe. So those are my overall thoughts and feelings and review on Injustice. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Please also hit and like those subscription and notification buttons so I can provide you with more high quality content like this in the future. But that's it for now. Take care of yourselves, stay at safe distances, and I will see you very, very soon.